Okay, so for my presentation today, you should have picked up a PowerPoint that looks like this, and then also just a separate handout that has a triangle on one side, and then like a chart on the other side. So if you have those, we're good to go. So we just learned a lot about differentiated instruction, and you guys got a lot of resources, and I want to tell you that it might be a good idea to start thinking about how you're going to organize all of these materials that you're going to be handed at seminars. Either with a binder with different sections, or probably the thing that would make the most sense would be just individual file folders, because then as you move forward with your career, then you'll know that you've got a differentiated instruction folder, and you've got a folder about MTSS, and you'll actually go to those folders, and you'll add things to them. So I would start thinking about how you're going to organize all of that. So we learned a lot of great strategies and a lot of different ways that we can differentiate. But there's a whole system that is in place in Kansas that is all about differentiation, and we really feel like we want you guys to leave here and understand that system, because that's the real world, and those are this will help you now understanding MTSS, but it's also going to help you as you interview, because I know when I've interviewed candidates, we ask them how familiar they are with MTSS. So understanding the system and understanding how it applies to what's going on now, but then also how you want it to happen in your new future classroom, wherever you go. So we saw the teacher in that video. She did a fantastic job, and she differentiated really well. She kind of differentiated as she was teaching by herself. So that's one way that we differentiate, and that's one way that we meet students' needs. But a lot of times we have to actually ask for help, and we have to have support with colleagues, and we have to think about all the different levels and address it a little bit differently than just during your core instruction. So that's kind of what MTSS is about. So I just want to share a little bit about the background. Some of this might be a little bit boring, but I'm hoping that it'll be really informative and make you think a little bit. Before we start, I just want to go around and give everyone a number, and that way when we talk with each other, I might call a number, and then you'd be the one to report out. So I thought that might be a good way to get responses. So starting with you, to start with 1. So I just thought, you just did something really important. You guys are all either working on right now Entry 2, which is contextual factors, or you already turned it into your clinical instructor. So let's talk a little bit about Entry 2 and the implications for that. So what is the importance of the contextual factors entry? Let's think for a minute about what was the importance. Why did we have you do that? And then turn to a couple people next to you and talk about what was the importance of the contextual factors entry. Okay, so what was the importance of the contextual factors entry? And we'll just start with 17. What did you guys talk about? You said that it helped us get to know our current students and start thinking about adaptations and accommodations and different things we can do to modify for them. Okay, good. Number 15, so thinking about just the different ways that we learn and the different, all 4 of those and how they might apply to your kids. And honestly, this is a great activity to do in your regular classroom every single year once you get your class. And you aren't going to get an assignment for this, and then nobody's going to tell you to do contextual factors on your kids. But just stopping and thinking about them, putting them out there, what do you know about them is a really good activity. What about the second question, which is how will you use your findings throughout the semester? So now you've got these great ideas, things that you've thought of. What are you going to do with them? So think for a couple of seconds about that. All right, share with your group. All right, give me 5. Okay, let's start with number 1. What did you guys talk about? how will you use your findings throughout the semester? Now you got this document. What are you going to do with it? Not forgetting any child. So now you kind of look at the kids and what they need. And what about specifically student A and student B? What implications does that have for this semester? When will you use that again? All the time. Good. You always need to think about those kids, and it depends who you chose. Some of you may have chosen, kids that there are other kids that have those exact same needs or similar needs, and some of you may have chosen somebody who might actually not have a lot of needs, and you didn't realize that when you first chose them. So there's lots of some of you chose higher level students, some of you chose lower level students. There's lots of different reasons you'll come back, and you'll specifically come back to that in the unit in entry 3. So you'll revisit them. Every single lesson you have to think about student A and student B. Okay. And then what is the hardest part about differentiation? Think about that one. What makes differentiation the hardest thing? I think personally, I used to think that disciplining students was the hardest thing, and I've changed my mind, and I believe that differentiation is the hardest part of teaching. Talk to your groups. Okay. All right, number 9. Okay, so sometimes when we are trying to address the needs of everybody, we do centers or we do groups, and we're by ourselves. We're the only teacher in there, and so you've got these great activities that you came up with, but then you're like over here with the teacher table, and you know something's not going right over there, and you know some kids are crazy over there, and you have to try to manage it all, but yet instruct these kids sitting here, and that's really difficult and hard to do. And I heard Elliot talking about, they're lucky right now because they've got the student teacher, the classroom teacher, 2 paras, an aide, somebody else, great parents in his class for sure that maybe would come in, but you don't always have all those different people that can walk around and help you monitor. So those are definitely challenges, and I would agree, that's the hardest part. And like what I heard Nicole say is you don't want to miss anybody. What if you accidentally aren't meeting the needs of all of your kids? And then that's a problem. And you've got a principal who's going to expect you to be accountable for all of your kids. And so this system that is in place in Kansas, the multi-tiered system of support, is supposed to kind of help us as we move forward to try to meet their needs. So that's what we're going to learn about today. So just to share with you kind of you can read that if you want, but multi-tier system of support is really mainly used in Kansas. If you were to Google MTSS, it's going to bring up Kansas as the way, but a lot of people kind of use it synonymously with like RTI or response to intervention. They're kind of, they're very similar where you're responding to students' needs, but we refer to it as MTSS. So it describes how schools provide support for all children in order to help them be successful. And ever since I, became a CI and started grading the entry 1, the word all stands out to me in everything I do, and all is part of that rubric. Think about entry 1. How are you going to meet the needs of all students? Well, a lot of this does have to do with differentiation. So think about that and how some things that you might learn today, you could actually apply to your paper as you get ready to write that philosophy. So this is a way for us to support all kids. And 2 laws that influence this, just so that you guys have some background, would be the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is now referred to as No Child Left Behind. And that law came into place, or it was revised to say that by the year 2014, all students would be proficient in math and reading. And when I started teaching, I was like, holy cow, I was like, that's far away. And I kept thinking of everything in comparison to 2014, and then all of a sudden it's 2015. The Child Left Behind, we're different now. We've got the new standards, and 2014 came and went, and not all students were proficient. And it's a good philosophy. It's a good purpose for us to have them all proficient, but we were struggling with getting them all there. So that's kind of one of the laws that influence this. And then the other one is just IDEA, which is the federal law that talks about special education and how the concept of response to intervention influence the way that we identify and serve students. So that influences MTSS as well. So the best form of implementation is a school-wide approach. And that doesn't always happen. Some schools have MTSS in place and there is one main structure. I know that Ware is a good example of that. And they have a pretty good structure in place for a school-wide building. They actually refer to MTSS as MIPS, and everybody knows what they're talking about when they're talking about MIPS. They go to meetings and I'd be like, what are you talking about? And like, oh, MTSS, they just call it MIPS. But they have a pretty good school-wide system in place. If a school-wide system is not in place, then you still need to try to do that in your classroom. And schools in Gary County, all schools have to do MTSS, but it looks different at every single building. And you'll find that as you talk to people, it looks very different at different buildings. But the steps are the same, no matter if you have a school-wide system in place or you're trying to do this in your classroom and then report to your principal. The steps are that you assess your kids. You analyze that assessment. You analyze the results of the assessment. A lot of times, at the beginning of the year, we use state assessment results for the older kids. And then you look at it and, okay, so who flew off the charts? Who's way above standards? Who met standards? Who's a little bit below standards? And who is like way below standards? That's the first step. And then you kind of take your kids and you just kind of sort them out. And actually, that one page that I gave you is just one year my principal had us actually put them into groups. Kids that were meeting standards, kids that were a little bit below, and kids that were really below. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is kind of one way to just start putting, you actually put your kids' names in this triangle. So you look at that, and then you plan, how am I going to teach them all? All of them being the Tier 1 kids. How are you going to reteach the some, the kids that are just a little bit below? They didn't meet standards, but they're like borderline, like teeter-tottering on that. What are you going to do for those kids that they're struggling with last year's standards? They're not just a little bit below, but they're below. And then how are you going to monitor their progress? How are you going to know that you've made any kind of difference at all? And that is key. That's the most important part of MTSS. And then after you've done some things, you made some plans, how you're going to teach this group of kids and this group of kids and then all of the kids. And after you've done that, you put some time into it, and then you reassess them. And you see, did they make the change? I've monitored their progress, but now if I give them that same test that they took at the beginning of the year, did they improve? So, and then it just kind of cycles back. Then you've got a new set of data. Then you take that data and you think, let me analyze that data. And then you plan to do something with that data, and you monitor the progress, and then you test them again, and then it starts over. So it's just a big cycle that keeps going back through. So this is like a diagram of what Kansas multi-tiered system of support really looks like. And we talk about, you'll hear, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and you'll hear all, some, and few. So Tier 1 is the bottom. It's the biggest, it's the fattest part of the triangle. And it is the fattest part because it's supposed to be about 80% of your kids. It's kids that are on target. They're doing a really good job with what you're teaching them. If you're teaching 4th grade, they're right there where they should be, getting good A's and B's. Then you've got the kids who are in this middle section. They're Tier 2, and they are the some kids. So some kids need this. And then you've got the very top of your pyramid, which is few, and that's Tier 3. And Tier 3 really should be few kids. A lot of times the Tier 3 kids are the kids that do have IEPs. They do have individualized education plans. They have plans for SOAR, 504s or something, and they are way below where they should be. There's room for flexibility. A lot of times the kids in Tier 3 stay there for a long time. But a lot of times kids might fluctuate between these two tiers because it just depends what tests you're giving them. Maybe this last unit was on geometry and you got a certain kind of results, but then this next math unit was on something else, totally different. And kids that did really well at geometry are not doing well at whatever your new skill is that you're teaching. So there's room to fluctuate between these tiers, but most often this tier up here, tier 3, stays the same. So just to go over what's up here, for all, it says in the all section, and you'll notice I didn't mention this part, MTSS is not just academics, it's also behavior. When our district implemented MTSS, that was about 5 years ago, we really focused the majority of our time on academics. Math and reading, and what are we going to do, and what does MTSS mean, and how are we going to differentiate, and what are we going to do? But shortly after, we have really done a good job of implementing some behavior plans at our schools, a lot of positive behavior systems. Mrs. Rothwell talked about camps and about those school-wide systems. That's addressing a lot of this behavior MTSS. So I guess I'll talk about the academics part because that's kind of where my mind is right now. But you do just test them like quarterly. So kids that are doing a really good job, then you really don't need to do all these extra tests all the time to try to see if they're growing and stuff because they did a good job the first time you gave them that test. Kids that are here, these are kids that you have to do more frequent progress monitoring. And a lot of times they say with tier 2, you progress monitor them like twice a month. Maybe on Fridays, you do some sort of progress monitoring. I'm thinking Dibbles right now, we use that as an intervention for fluency. And a lot of you you saw your teachers give the Dibbles test a couple weeks ago. Raise your hand if you saw your teachers or you know what Dibbles is. I'm sure you know what it is, but maybe you haven't given it. Well, we have to give it 3 times a year. But there's a progress monitoring piece of it that goes along where you can have a different booklet that has all these different fluency passages. And weekly, you could even work with a kid and monitor their progress and chart them to see them growing and then do the benchmark test again. So I kind of think about that as up here, like the couple times a month, maybe you test them every 2 weeks on Friday to see what their fluency is. That is a small group of kids that have extra tutoring. You cannot meet their needs with just what you're doing with everybody doing it. And then this group, this is with you, this even needs more frequent progress monitoring, probably weekly. So these kids need customized interventions. That's why they have IEPs. They have specific needs that have to be met. And over here, it's very similar with behavior. It goes through what we do for all kids, what we do for some kids, and what we do for few kids. And that does change with different schools and different beliefs and different things that they have in place. So in my previous school, we had to fill in these out for reading, for math, for science, for writing, and for behavior. So that was good. Science mainly because science is the best. Okay, questions? Okay. So here we're just going to talk, I'm just going to review a little bit and then probably move on. It says, for everybody, no matter what tier kids are in, we have high expectations for them. We want to meet all of their needs. We are adults, lots of different abilities in our classroom, and that's what makes teaching fun and that's what makes teaching hard. And you've got learners at all levels. Some schools have things in place like Success for All, which is kind of an intervention. Success for All is for those of you that don't know, is a reading resource. I don't want to say program. It's a reading system in place where the kids are kind of levelized. And so they're tested, and then if I test that I'm at a 3rd grade level, that I'm a 2nd grader, I can go to a 3rd grade level reading for reading for 90 minutes. And then after that 90 minutes, I come back to my regular classroom. So you're levelized according to your ability. But not all classrooms have that, and so you have to differentiate for lots of all subjects. Tier 3 and Tier 1, typically easy to put a plan into place. It's those Tier 2 kids that's hard because they fluctuate and stuff. And Tier 2 kids do fall between the cracks a lot of times. Those are the kids that you're like, just give him my finger on it. He's not getting it, I just don't know what to do. But then you move on to the next unit, and you're like, well, hopefully he'll catch up. Okay. In an ideal world, and in most schools in Gary County, we have a lot of support. Your Tier 1, that bottom of this triangle, this is really you as the classroom teacher. This is your job, and pretty much, you've got some support, but this is what you're planning to teach. For the some, a lot of times, you have to collaborate, and you collaborate with other classroom teachers. If you have 5 fifth grade teachers, then all 5 of you get together and you talk about those kids and you talk about them all the time. You know, my teaching partner should know that Susie in the class is really struggling. And she should be able to ask me, how did it go this week with her? Did she make any progress or whatever? We should talk about it all the time. But you should also have in place support people who, like paraprofessionals and people who possibly can take a group. Tier 3 would be where you have you and you have everybody else helping you. I mean, there are a lot of people really focused on these kids that are Tier 3 kids. You have the special education teachers, you have the ELL teachers, you've got your principal doing meetings, you get the parents involved. Tier 3, you have a lot more support. Typically, when at the very beginning of the year, you give the test, you look at it, and you split everybody up, and then you decide what are you going to be able to meet the needs of during the core teaching time, and what are you going to have to do something different for. And a lot of times people call that different time like intervention time, or NITS time, or MTSS time, or small groups. What does Sheridan call it? Win time. What I need most time. So, your school comes up with something fun, but they want to, make it theirs. Like I know at Sheridan, they've all used shapes. And so everybody's doors have different shapes on it, and the kids all know I'm a trapezoid. I go to that room for win time. So you think about it, what can you accomplish in your core teaching time, and what are you going to have to do at intervention time? We are lucky. Our district does so much work for us. And they've actually taken, all the grades, and they have pretty much figured out if a kid is scoring this, then that means that they're in Tier 1. If a kid is scoring this on this test, that means that they're Tier 3. And so we've got lots of these charts and graphs for our district that we can kind of plug a kid in. Okay, he got this on his SRI, that's a reading test that we did. So that must mean that he's here. Does that match up with his dibbles? Weird. He has this, and then you have to make some professional judgment. Okay, I think I'm going to put him, since he scored here for one test and here for another test, and let's categorize him as Tier 2. So that's kind of awesome about our district, that they do so much work to help us figure out these things. And it not only does this, but it gives you some, ideas for how you can meet their needs. So for Tier 2 here, this is reading grade 3. It suggests ability grouping. It suggests practicing fluency, versatiles, different Florida curriculum resource, something activities. That's a great website we use a lot in our district for interventions. Florida, that website, Florida, Second Florida Intervention, lots of different ideas. But okay. Some people have a whole school model, like something like this. And this is actually one that I had at, I used to teach at Custerville over there. And this is what we did one year, where Monday, Tuesday, well, first of all, everybody had this schedule. So kindergarten always did our MTSS time from 10:30 to 11. We called it SOAR time. And then 11:45 to 12:15 was 5th grade, and everybody had that time. And on Mondays and Tuesdays, we worked on reading. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, we worked on math. And on Fridays, we progress monitored. And so we still had our group, but then we were testing and stuff on that day. We also were a Title I school over there, so we had some tutors. Not all schools are Title I schools, and not all schools have extra tutors and people that can help. But we had, for this first group, kindergarten, we had the librarian actually took a group, and the tutor took a group, and they were able to really divide out their kids. I know kindergarten, the year that this was our schedule, they had this system in place where the kids were either monkeys, hippos, or lions, for medium, high, or low. So the kids didn't know, they just were monkeys, and my daughter was there that year, and she was really sad though, because she loved monkeys, that's her favorite animal, and she wasn't in that group, and so they didn't, they just had no idea. That's how it was divided out. I hear a hippo over there. So So here's just some people that can help you, and so if you do something like this and you have all these extra people to support you, then wow, you can split your 20 kids into 6 different groups for MTSS time. It's not always the case. It's not always that easy. And high achievers sometimes are the ones that get kind of forgotten, which is sad. Okay. So let's just stop and I'll have another question. So why do we collect data? What's the purpose of collecting data? Why do we progress monitor? Why do we need those numbers? All right, talk to your group. Number 4, why do we collect data? Very good, to make sure that they're getting it, to see if they're making the progress. Yeah, so it's not the end of the quarter and you're not walking into your principal's office and they say, what happened? He didn't make any games. And you're like, and then say, what did you do to try to help that? You have to be able to say, well, I put this into place and this into place, and this is how I progress monitored. Here's my data, and look, this is how. And progress monitoring doesn't have to look pretty. My principal that I used to have was really big about this. She said, don't get so hung up on these amazing graphs and color coding and all this stuff. Put pluses and minuses and check marks on a piece of paper for different skills to show me. Maybe you worked with John 6 times on, rounding or something like that. And you go, rounding is your skill. And maybe on this little box you've got 5 minuses and 1 check mark. Then I can tell that John still is struggling with this because you've worked with him 6 times and he's just now maybe starting to kind of understand it. It's okay to be messy. It's okay, especially when you're getting started. Now, a lot of people don't like to be messy and they like to have specific charts, and that does make things a lot easier. But as you're just trying to figure things out, it's okay sometimes to be a little bit just figuring out what's going to work best for you. I have to go back really fast to this and share that the video that we watched with Mrs. Hafner. She had that lady that did a really nice job of differentiating during the area improvement or whatever. We tried that once at one of the schools that I worked at where like a cartoon doll. The teachers were a little frustrated. They were saying, why do we have to have this specific time to teach? I'm differentiating all day long. I differentiate in everything I do. By you giving me this 30-minute block, that's taking the 30 minutes that I can be teaching a different subject. And so the principal was like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to let you, be professional and make some, time. If you want to differentiate during the day, however you want, then just be able to show me your data. And it really backfired because some people, yes, especially the people who were really for that, who were really like, I'm differentiating all day. They were able to come in and show how they had, during math, they'd come over and they'd worked with this kid, and then they'd come over there and they'd worked with this kid, and then they called a group back, and they were really good at that. Whereas other people, especially newer teachers, they really struggled because they almost forgot. You're in survival mode. You're just trying to teach your day. You're like trying to get through your plans, and then you feel good because you taught everything on your paper. But then you realize, I have no idea, how they're doing in this because I did not differentiate. But if you have that time, then it's nice to be like, okay, I'm working with this group today, and this is what we're working on, and I'm progress monitoring, and I've got data, and you want to show something for it. So I really wanted to say that wasn't a good idea for us, but that might work for more experienced teachers. Here's an example of a data log. This is one that I used one year for math, and I just had, this was a kind of a 6-week group, and so every Friday I progress monitored them, and each column was a different Friday that I progress on, and I just had 10, however many questions, and I put their percentage, and I was hoping to see if they improved, if they, over time. Here's somebody else's log that they liked using, and if you look at it, it's just, anecdotal notes, and for some people that works. So, and then I included on the back of the triangle page, this is a a great behavior log that you can use. Somebody made this over at Sheridan, and basically it has the kids down the side, has the days of the week. It has down at the bottom codes that you can put in for them. So, gosh, if you saw a kid that had nothing for the whole week, then that kid did a really good job that week. But if you saw a kid who's having some trends or bullying behaviors or something else, then those would be good red flags for you to be able to have something and show somebody on 3 separate accounts this week, so-and-so did this. So this is a really cool form, log to use. So this is an example of a quarterly data check. So I just want you to look at this for a second. What are some things that maybe stand out at you? So whatever this standard was, a lot of hundreds. Good. Any other observations? Is it easier to have things stand out at you when it looks like this? Yeah. So some brilliant person a couple years ago that I was working with decided to start color coding their data, and at my school we called these Go Green sheets, and they were like, that's beautiful. Like you can see, you can see the kid problems, but you can also, what do you notice about that very last row? Well, opposite. That kid is struggling in everything. But back to whoever just said that about the teacher problem, I would think about this still. If a teacher had so many kids, and this is actually really good, but you'll see some of these sometimes where this is all red, and this would alert the instructional coach and the principal and everybody to be like, wow, look at this. What's going on with this standard? How many times did you teach that? So much easier to read and look like that. Okay, and then this is just me saying earlier that it's not just about academics, but it is about behavior as well. And you have to kind of ease into it at the building, but at the same Gary County, all of our schools really do have that in place, and so that's kind of nice to, you might even just ask around at your school. If you haven't really noticed anything about groupings, or you just ask your operating teacher, does the school have an MTSS program, or, how do they handle that? And one thing I forgot to mention in here that I've been thinking about is another reason why that data is so important that we keep is because oftentimes we have a student who's like, we're worried. We're really worried about a student for behavior or for academics. And they're on our radar. We have put something into place. We're trying really hard in our classroom. You want to make sure that you don't get too crazy with changing your interventions. So you put an intervention in place, a good research-based intervention that you found that you think is going to work. Don't change it in 2 days because you think that it's not going to work. You have to try it for about 10 days before you can really say that it's not a good intervention. So interventions there's so many great ones, but you can't be trying a different one every 2 days. And one of the reasons for that is those kids that we worry about, sometimes we take to student improvement team in our buildings. We're really worried. We've tried a couple things for a long time, and it's not working. We need help. So you go to a student intervention team, we call it SIT, and you've got people like the instructional coach and the ESS teachers and the principal and lots of people there to help, the speech teacher. There's just lots of people at the building. And if you're going to say, I've tried this, and nothing's working, they can't really help you because you haven't really narrowed anything down. You're not really able to tell us much except for the fact that you tried 10 different things. But if you're able to go in and say, okay, I was really worried about his fluency, so the first thing I put into place was we practiced reading an extra 10 minutes a day with a partner, and then, repeated readings for 5 days a week. We tried that for 3 weeks, and his fluency score did not go up. So then I tried increasing that to 15 minutes a day, and his score still, it went down. So if you're able to actually show, look, I charted this. This time he got a 20 words per minute, this time he got 21, this time he got 19, this time he got 20, this time he got 18, this time he got 21, then you're able to show really good data. And you have to have the data in this day and age. So that's why progress monitoring is so important. So the last question what can you take away from this information and immediately apply it in your daily thinking, planning, and teaching? So what can you take away from this and then actually like do something during student teaching? Think about that. Okay, share some teams. Okay, so number 13. I love that. And, you know, I think we might, I don't know if you've like had a notebook where you're putting the kids' names in and you're really trying to get to know them, but that's an idea you could do. You could have a page for every kid and kind of just jot down. You're not really the person who's mainly in control in the classroom, but this is good practice for you. And you can always take notes on what's happened, what worked and what didn't work. So very good. What about number 9? Okay, I think very good. Number 6. And, your cooperating teacher probably has a system in place. If you don't know it yet, ask questions about that. And as you start taking over, you turn lesson plans in all the time, and you start turning in a lot more. But sometimes you might say, I don't really know what an assessment might be for this. It's okay to have a checklist and have something that's kind of ongoing. Especially for kindergarten, you've got all these things that you're teaching during read aloud and all these, setting and concepts of print and things like that. Have a chart that you are keeping track of every day, and you're kind of just, who knows what the title is? Who really doesn't understand, the title page or whatever, so things like that. Any questions? I'm sorry to keep you guys a little longer. I wasn't sure how long that would take, so now I know for next time. Thank you guys, and make sure you have all your handouts if you want any cookies, take them. So, okay.